My ex sabotaged every relationship after him, so I made him fall for his own trap. For 3 years after breaking up with Dylan, every guy I dated mysteriously disappeared. First was Trevor, who ghosted me after our 5th date. Then came Alex, who suddenly decided he wasn't ready for commitment. Then Kai, who claimed his ex wanted him back. Then Marcus, who said his friends thought I was bad news. Then Oliver, who suddenly got back together with his college girlfriend. Then David, who said he needed to focus on his career. Then Luis, who moved back home to help his sick mother. The pattern was too obvious to ignore. My best friend confirmed my suspicions when she accidentally mentioned seeing Dylan at the coffee shop where Trevor worked. Apparently, Dylan had been showing up wherever I took my dates, spinning sob stories about how I was unstable, how I cheated on him, how I was using guys for money. All lies, but delivered with the wounded puppy dog eyes that had fooled me for 2 years. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Maybe Dylan just frequented the same places I did. Our city wasn't that big after all. But then my coworker mentioned seeing him at the restaurant where I'd had my 3rd date with Alex, and my neighbor spotted him outside the movie theater where Marcus and I had gone to see that new action film. My yoga instructor casually brought up a conversation she'd had with some guy who seemed really concerned about one of her students. Me. Dylan was stalking my dates, systematically, methodically, like it was his full-time job. The breaking point came when I met Ethan. He was different, kind, funny, and genuinely interested in building something real. A high school science teacher who coached the debate team and volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. He had this way of listening that made me feel heard for the first time in years. We'd been seeing each other for 3 weeks when he called, sounding distant. "Your ex came to my office," he said. "He seemed really concerned about you. Said you have some serious issues I should know about." My blood boiled. Dylan worked in marketing, which meant he was excellent at manipulation and presentation. He'd probably prepared a whole PowerPoint about my supposed red flags. "What exactly did he say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ethan hesitated. "He said you had abandonment issues, that you'd falsely accused him of cheating and tried to isolate him from his friends. He showed me screenshots of texts where you supposedly threatened to hurt yourself if he left. He seemed genuinely worried about your mental health." My hands shook with rage. Those screenshots were fake, or taken completely out of context. The text about hurting myself had been from when I'd fallen off my bike and scraped my knee badly. I'd texted Dylan saying I might need stitches and could really hurt myself if I kept riding without proper gear. Another was from when I joked about dying of embarrassment after tripping in front of his coworkers, but presented without context, stripped of their innocent explanations. They looked like suicide threats. "What else did he show you?" I asked. Ethan's voice grew uncomfortable. "Photos of you crying. He said you had these episodes where you'd break down and accuse him of things that weren't true. He showed me medical records that suggested you were on antidepressants." I nearly threw my phone across the room. The crying photos were from when my grandmother died. Dylan had taken them while comforting me at the funeral. The medical records he'd somehow obtained illegally, probably through his friend who worked at the clinic I'd visited for a routine physical. Dylan had weaponized my grief, my privacy, my vulnerability. I started documenting everything. Every friend who mentioned seeing Dylan near my dates. Every conversation where someone casually brought up concerns he'd planted. The web of lies was massive. He'd convinced half our mutual friends that I was unhinged, that breaking up with him had broken something fundamental in me. I created a spreadsheet tracking every incident, dates, times, witnesses, details. The pattern was undeniable. Dylan would research my dates on social media within hours of me posting about them. He'd find their workplaces, their regular hangouts, their social circles. Then he'd insert himself into their lives as the concerned ex-boyfriend who just wanted to protect them from making a terrible mistake. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Detective Rivera, who specialized in stalking cases. She was a former police officer who'd started her own agency after seeing too many stalking cases dismissed by the courts. Within a week, she had a folder full of evidence. Photos of Dylan following my dates to work, video footage of him striking up conversations with them at coffee shops and bars, audio recordings of him spinning his sob stories to strangers. The worst part was how systematic it was. Dylan would research my dates on social media, find their workplaces, their hangout spots, their friend groups. He'd show up looking devastated, claiming he was worried about me. He'd mention specific details about our relationship that made him seem credible. How I supposedly had trust issues. How I'd accused him of cheating when he was just being friendly. How I'd threatened to hurt myself when he tried to leave. None of it was true. But Dylan was charming. And wounded men telling stories about crazy exes are always believed. He'd even created fake social media profiles to corroborate his stories. Accounts that claimed to be mutual friends who'd witnessed my supposed breakdowns. Screenshots of conversations that never happened. Photoshopped images that made me look unstable or aggressive. It was elaborate and sick. Detective Rivera showed me surveillance footage from the restaurant where Dylan had approached Alex. I watched him put on a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Tears welling up in his eyes as he described how worried he was about me, how he just wanted me to get help. His body language was perfect. Slouched shoulders, nervous hand gestures, the occasional voice crack. Alex bought every word of it. The recording captured their entire conversation. Dylan described incident after incident that had never happened. Me supposedly keying his car when he tried to break up with me. Me showing up at his work and causing a scene. Me threatening his mother over the phone. Me spreading rumors about him to mutual friends. All lies. But Alex didn't know that. That's when I realized Dylan wasn't just sabotaging my relationships. He was destroying my entire reputation, piece by piece, person by person. Every time someone new entered my life, Dylan would contaminate that relationship with his poison. He'd done this for 3 years. Systematically isolated me from any chance of happiness. Made me question my own sanity, convinced me that maybe I really was the problem. That night, I decided to fight fire with fire. I created a fake dating profile using photos of my gorgeous cousin Maya, who lived across the country. Maya had always been Dylan's type, blonde, petite, with that girl next door smile he claimed to love. She'd modeled part-time in college, so I had plenty of professional quality photos to choose from. I spent hours crafting the perfect personality, adventurous but not reckless, successful but not intimidating, just vulnerable enough to trigger his savior complex. Sophia was a graphic designer who loved hiking and craft beer. She'd recently gotten out of a long relationship and was looking for someone genuine. She had a rescue dog named Bruno and volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends. She was into yoga, organic cooking, and indie films. She read philosophy books and listened to obscure podcasts about existentialism. She was everything Dylan thought he wanted in a woman, and everything he'd never actually been able to keep. Her bio read, looking for something real after wasting 2 years with someone who turned out to be a pathological liar. Ready to trust again with the right person. No games, no drama, just honest connection. It was bait Dylan couldn't resist. I created multiple social media accounts for Sophia, complete with years of fake history, photos from fake vacations, check-ins at trendy restaurants, posts about her design work. I even created fake friends who would comment on her posts and tag her in photos. The digital footprint was comprehensive and believable. Within a week, Dylan had messaged Sophia. His opening line was pathetic. "Hey beautiful, you seem too good to be true. What's the catch?" I crafted Sophia's response carefully. "No catch, just tired of games. What you see is what you get. Though I've learned to be cautious after my last relationship. Some people aren't who they pretend to be." For 2 months, I played the long game. Sophia was impressed by his job, laughed at his mediocre jokes, and shared his interests. She'd grown up in a small town like he had. She loved the same obscure bands he'd introduced me to years ago. She even mentioned having trust issues from her last relationship, but said she was working through them in therapy. She was also conveniently traveling for work, which explained why they could only video chat and text. I told Dylan that Sophia was working on a major project for a client in another city, designing their entire brand identity from scratch. She'd be traveling back and forth for months, living in temporary housing, working crazy hours. I used old videos Maya had posted on social media, carefully editing out any identifying details. During their video calls, I'd play these clips on my laptop while typing responses on my phone. Dylan was so smitten he never questioned why Sophia's camera quality was always poor or why she always had to cut calls short due to client meetings or connection issues. The conversations became increasingly intimate. Dylan shared details about his childhood, his fears, his dreams of starting his own marketing agency someday. He talked about his complicated relationship with his father, who'd never thought he was good enough, his insecurity about his receding hairline, his fear that he'd never find someone who truly understood him. He also talked about his past relationships, including ours, painting himself as the victim every time. According to him, every ex-girlfriend had been crazy, manipulative, or broken. I was supposedly the worst of all. A pathological liar who'd tried to destroy his reputation after he'd caught me cheating. The lies were so elaborate, I almost admired his creativity. He told Sophia that I'd hacked into his social media accounts and sent inappropriate messages to his female coworkers. That I'd shown up at his apartment drunk and threatened to kill myself on his doorstep. That I'd called his mother and told her he was abusing me. None of it had happened. But Dylan told these stories with such conviction that even I started to doubt my own memories for a moment. He told Sophia about his current situation with his psycho ex who couldn't move on, how I was supposedly sabotaging his attempts to find happiness, how he'd tried to warn the guys I dated, not out of jealousy, but out of genuine concern for their well-being. He painted himself as a reluctant hero, forced to protect innocent men from my manipulation. Sophia sympathized with his plight. She shared stories about her own ex who'd spread rumors about her at work, cost her a promotion, and tried to turn her friends against her. She understood how painful it was to have someone you once loved try to destroy your life out of spite. Dylan ate it up. He started opening up about tactics he'd used to protect my dates from me, how he'd done research to find out where they worked, where they spent time, how he'd approached them as a concerned friend, just looking out for their best interests, how he'd shown them evidence of my instability to save them from making a terrible mistake. He was confessing to stalking, and he thought he was being heroic. The more Dylan talked, the more evidence I gathered. Every conversation was recorded. Every confession was documented. He was building his own case against himself, one text message at a time. Dylan fell hard. He started talking about flying out to meet her, about how she might be the one he'd been searching for his whole life. He even asked his friends what ring styles women liked, thinking I wouldn't hear about it through our mutual social circle. I had friends screenshot his social media posts about finding his soulmate. His Instagram stories were full of quotes about finding someone who truly understood him. He posted pictures of sunsets with captions about how everything was finally falling into place. Photos of flowers with long paragraphs about believing in love again. His behavior became obsessive. He'd text Sophia good morning and good night every single day. He'd send her photos of his meals, his workouts, random things he saw that reminded him of her. He bought clothes he thought she'd like and books she'd mentioned wanting to read. Meanwhile, I watched him continue sabotaging my life. When I started seeing someone new, a sweet teacher named Ben, Dylan would mysteriously appear at their gym, their coffee shop, their workplace, always with the same concerned expression, the same carefully crafted warnings. But this time, I was ready. I'd warned Ben in advance. Told him about Dylan's pattern, showed him the evidence Detective Rivera had collected. When Dylan approached Ben at his school, Ben was recording everything on his phone. The audio was damning. Dylan's voice clear as day, telling Ben that I was unstable, that I'd falsely accused him of abuse, that I was probably doing the same thing to Ben right now. He described incidents that had never happened, showed those same fake screenshots he'd used before. Ben played along, acting concerned and asking for details. Dylan provided them eagerly, describing how I'd supposedly shown up at his work and caused a scene, how I'd threatened his new girlfriend at the time, how I'd tried to get him fired by spreading lies about him to his boss. That recording became evidence in the restraining order I filed against him. But before I served him with papers, I wanted to finish what I'd started. Dylan had also started confiding in Sophia about his family, his controlling mother who'd never approved of any woman he'd dated, his successful brother who always made him feel inferior, his father who'd walked out when Dylan was 12 and never looked back. Sophia became his therapist, his confidant, his dream girl, all rolled into one. He told her things he'd never told me during our 2 years together, about his panic attacks in college, about the antidepressants he'd hidden from everyone, about his fear that he was fundamentally unlovable. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered the 3 years of isolation he'd put me through, the therapy bills from rebuilding my self-esteem, the relationships that could have been meaningful if he hadn't poisoned them from the start. The night before their planned first meeting, I got a call from Ethan. "I need to apologize," he said. "Your ex showed up again." But this time he was drunk and ranting about some girl named Sophia. He kept saying he finally found someone perfect, someone who wasn't damaged like you. But then he started describing all the things he'd done to sabotage your other relationships. He was bragging about it, like it was some kind of accomplishment. I realized he's been lying this whole time. Ethan's voice was full of disgust. He told me how Dylan had laughed about manipulating my dates, how he'd described it as protecting them from making his mistake, how he'd shown Ethan fake evidence, and coached him on what to say if I ever asked about their conversation. I smiled. Phase 2 was about to begin. The next morning, I watched from across the street as Dylan arrived at the upscale restaurant where he was supposed to meet Sophia. He'd bought a new shirt, gotten his hair cut, and was carrying flowers, roses, because Sophia had mentioned loving them in one of their conversations. He'd also brought a small wrapped gift, something he'd been mysterious about in their texts. For an hour, he sat at that table, checking his phone every 30 seconds. He looked genuinely happy, more excited than I'd seen him in years. He kept straightening his shirt, practicing what he was going to say, smiling at nothing. Part of me almost felt bad about what I was going to do. Almost. I sent him a message as Sophia. "Running a few minutes late. Order us some wine. So excited to finally meet you in person." Dylan's face lit up as he read the message. He flagged down the waitress immediately, ordered an expensive bottle of wine, and settled in to wait for his perfect woman. Another hour passed. Dylan's confident smile faded into confusion, then concern, then embarrassment as other diners began to stare. The waitress kept asking if he wanted to order food. He kept insisting his date was coming, showing her Sophia's photo on his phone as if that would make her materialize. He called twice. Both calls went to voicemail, a generic recording I'd set up using a voice modulator app to disguise my voice. "Hi, you've reached Sophia. I can't come to the phone right now, but your call is important to me. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." Dylan left increasingly frantic voicemails. The first was casual. "Hey babe, just wondering where you are. No rush, I'll wait." The second was more concerned. "Sophia, I'm getting worried. Did something happen? Please call me back." The third was desperate. "Please, just let me know you're okay. I'm starting to panic here." Finally, after watching him suffer for 3 hours, I sent the message that would destroy him. "I'm so sorry, Dylan, but I can't do this anymore. I know about what you did to your ex-girlfriend, how you've been sabotaging her relationships, how you've been lying to people about her. Someone who would do that to another person isn't someone I can trust. You're exactly the kind of man my mother warned me about. Don't contact me again." I watched his face crumble as he read it. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands started shaking. The flowers fell from his hands onto the floor and he didn't even notice. He looked around the restaurant like a lost child, then stumbled outside without paying for the wine. He called Sophia immediately, 17 times in a row. When that didn't work, he started texting. "Please let me explain. It's not what you think, she's crazy. She's been stalking me. I was trying to protect those guys. Please don't do this. You don't understand what she's capable of. I never lied to you about anything. She's manipulating the situation. I'm nothing like she's making me seem. Please just give me a chance to explain." But I wasn't done. Not even close. Over the next week, I had Sophia reach out to every mutual friend we had. She told them about Dylan's confession during one of their late-night phone calls, how he'd bragged about ruining my relationships, how he thought it was funny that I couldn't move on, how he described me as pathetic and desperate, saying I'd never find anyone better than him because I was too damaged. She shared screenshots of his messages where he trash-talked me, calling me crazy and saying I deserved to be alone. Messages where he'd detailed his sabotage tactics like they were accomplishments, where he'd laughed about how easy it was to convince people I was unstable, where he'd described my dates as weak-minded idiots who believed anything they were told. The screenshots were real. I'd carefully saved every cruel thing he'd said about me during our 2-month conversation, every casual insult, every calculated lie, every moment where his mask had slipped and revealed the monster underneath. The group chat among our friends exploded. Screenshots flew back and forth as people compared stories. Suddenly, everyone started remembering things differently. Comments Dylan had made that seemed off at the time. Questions he'd asked about my whereabouts that seemed invasive. Times he'd steered conversations toward my supposed mental health issues. Our mutual friend Ashley was the first to reach out. "I owe you the biggest apology." Dylan showed us those screenshots, and we believed him. We had no idea he was manipulating the situation. "I feel sick thinking about how we treated you." More messages followed, friends apologizing for believing his lies, coworkers admitting they'd been uncomfortable with how Dylan talked about his ex but hadn't said anything. Even acquaintances reached out to share their own stories about Dylan's suspicious behavior. His brother called me directly. I owe you an apology too. Dylan admitted everything when I confronted him with the screenshots. He's been telling us you were stalking him and wouldn't let go. We had no idea he was the one causing problems. Our family wants you to know we're disgusted by his behavior. Mom's beside herself with shame. Even his coworkers started distancing themselves. Word had spread through their office about what kind of person he really was. His boss called him in for a meeting about maintaining professional standards and how his personal behavior was reflecting poorly on the company. Clients had started asking questions after hearing rumors about their account manager's stalking behavior. Dylan's carefully constructed reputation crumbled overnight. 3 years of building sympathy for himself as the victim of a crazy ex were destroyed by his own words. 3 days later, Dylan showed up at my apartment. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by desperation. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unwashed, his hands shaking. Please, he begged through my doorbell intercom. I know you created Sophia. I know it was you. Just tell everyone it was fake. Tell them I was drunk and making things up. I'll leave you alone forever, I promise. I'll move to another city. I'll do whatever you want. I smiled sweetly as I opened the door. The same smile I'd given him when he used to gaslight me about flirting with other women. Prove it, I said. He couldn't. Maya's photos were real. The dating profile had been created with a legitimate email address using a VPN. There was no digital trail leading back to me. Sophia simply existed, and she'd exposed him using his own words. Dylan started crying on my doorstep, actual tears streaming down his face. This wasn't part of his plan. He was used to controlling narratives, manipulating situations to his advantage. Being outplayed by the woman he'd underestimated was his worst nightmare. You destroyed my life, he sobbed. No, I corrected him calmly. You destroyed your own life. Sophia just held up a mirror. He tried bargaining, offered to pay for therapy for both of us, promised to make public apologies to everyone he'd lied to, said he'd move to another city if I wanted. He'd even sign a contract promising never to contact me or interfere in my life again. But the damage was done. And frankly, I was enjoying watching him squirm. I have recordings of everything you said to Sophia, I told him. Hours of audio where you confessed to stalking my dates, screenshots of you bragging about ruining my relationships, evidence of you creating fake social media profiles and manufacturing false evidence against me. His face went white. You recorded me without consent. That's illegal. I shrugged. So is stalking. So is harassment. So is defamation. Want to compare legal troubles? Dylan realized he was trapped. Any legal action he took against me would only bring more attention to his crimes. Any attempt to discredit Sophia would require him to prove she was fake, which would expose his own lies. Within a month, Dylan had lost half his friend group. His coworkers started treating him differently after word spread about his behavior. His boss assigned him to smaller accounts and excluded him from client meetings. The woman he'd been casually seeing dumped him when she heard what kind of person he really was. His landlord received an anonymous tip about suspicious behavior in the building. Apparently, someone had been seen following residents and taking photos. When security reviewed the footage, they found dozens of instances of Dylan loitering in areas where he didn't belong, clearly watching and photographing people. He was asked to move out when his lease expired. His gym membership was revoked after multiple complaints about him approaching women and asking inappropriate questions about their personal lives. His favorite coffee shop asked him not to return after baristas reported feeling uncomfortable with how he watched and followed female customers. Meanwhile, Ethan and I started dating again. This time, Dylan left us alone. He'd learned that sabotaging my relationships would only lead to his own destruction. But the best part came 6 months later. Dylan had finally found someone new, a sweet girl named Rachel, who worked at the gym he'd joined after being banned from his old one. I happened to run into her at the grocery store and recognized her from his sparse social media posts. Are you Rachel? I asked innocently. Dylan's girlfriend? Her face lit up. Yes. How do you know him? We dated a few years ago, I said casually. He's a great guy. Just wanted to give you a heads up though. He tends to get really jealous when his girlfriends talk to other men. Like, irrationally jealous. He used to follow me around and confront any guy I talked to. I thought it was romantic at first, but it got pretty controlling. I watched the seeds of doubt plant themselves in her mind. Also, I added with fake concern, just be careful about his ex stories. He told me his last girlfriend was crazy and stalked him, but I later found out he was the one harassing her. He even got a restraining order filed against him. Just thought you should know in case he tries to pull that again. Rachel's smile faltered. A restraining order? Yeah, I said sadly. I felt terrible when I found out the truth. This poor girl had tried to move on with her life, and Dylan had been systematically destroying every relationship she tried to have. The judge was pretty disgusted when he saw all the evidence. 2 weeks later, Dylan was single again. Rachel had started paying attention to the red flags I'd pointed out, and she didn't like what she saw. She'd caught him checking her phone when she was in the shower, found out he'd been driving by her work during his lunch breaks, timing his visits to coincide with her schedule. When she confronted him about it, he'd spun some story about wanting to surprise her with flowers, but she wasn't buying it anymore. She'd also done her own research, found the court records from my restraining order, talked to mutual friends who confirmed the stories about his stalking behavior, discovered that he'd lied about his employment status. He'd actually been demoted at work and was barely hanging on to his job. Rachel broke up with him in a public place, bringing a friend for support. When Dylan tried to argue and convince her she was making a mistake, she pulled out her phone and started recording. I know what you did to your ex, she said calmly. I know about the stalking, the lies, the restraining order. I'm not going to be your next victim. The video went viral in our local social media groups. Dylan became a cautionary tale that women shared with each other. The beauty of my revenge was its sustainability. I'd taught Dylan's friends to recognize his manipulation tactics. I'd shown his potential partners what to watch for. Every lie he'd used against me became a weapon against him. Word spread through our social circles about what he'd done. Women started warning each other about him. His dating pool shrank to basically nothing. Dating apps started recognizing his photos and banning his accounts after multiple reports. Dylan tried to reinvent himself. He deleted all his social media accounts and created new ones with different photos. Started going to different bars, different gyms, different coffee shops. Moved to a new apartment across town. Even changed his hairstyle and started dressing differently. But our city wasn't that big, and people talk. Screenshots of his old profiles circulated in group chats. Photos from the restaurant where he'd been stood up became memes in local Facebook groups. His reputation followed him everywhere. He even tried therapy, posting about his journey of self-improvement and learning from past mistakes. But the posts rang hollow to anyone who knew the truth. Besides, most people had blocked him by then. His professional life continued to deteriorate. His boss received anonymous emails detailing Dylan's harassment of former girlfriends. Clients started requesting different account managers. His performance reviews cited concerns about his judgment and interpersonal skills. Dylan tried to reach out one last time, sending a long email about how sorry he was, how he'd learned his lesson, how he just wanted both of us to move on with our lives. He claimed he was seeing a therapist and taking medication for what he called his obsessive tendencies. He promised he was a changed man who just wanted forgiveness and a fresh start. I deleted it without reading past the first line. Some people think revenge is about getting even, but the best revenge is making someone face the consequences of their own actions. Dylan spent years sabotaging my happiness because he couldn't handle the fact that I'd moved on without him. Now he knows how it feels to have someone else control his narrative. The difference is, everything I told people about him was true. 6 months after that, I heard through mutual friends that Dylan had gotten fired from his marketing job. Apparently, his behavior toward female coworkers had become problematic. He'd been overheard making comments about his ex-girlfriends that made people uncomfortable. HR had received multiple complaints about him asking invasive questions about women's personal lives and following them to their cars after work. The final straw came when a client complained that Dylan had been asking inappropriate questions about her dating life during what was supposed to be a professional meeting about her company's advertising campaign. She'd felt so uncomfortable that she'd requested a different representative and threatened to take her business elsewhere. His own mother called me to apologize. She'd always suspected something was wrong with how Dylan talked about his relationships, but she'd never realized the extent of his behavior. "I raised him better than this," she said through tears. "His father and I are horrified by what we've learned. I'm so sorry for what he put you through. We had no idea he was capable of such cruelty." She told me that Dylan had been living with them since losing his job, but his behavior was affecting the whole family. He'd become paranoid and aggressive, convinced that I was somehow orchestrating a conspiracy against him. He'd accused her of being in contact with me, of feeding me information about his life. "We've asked him to move out," she said quietly. "I can't have that energy in my house anymore. It's not healthy for any of us." Dylan's younger sister reached out too. She'd always looked up to her big brother, but learning the truth about his behavior had shattered her image of him. "He used to give me dating advice," she said, "told me to watch out for crazy girls who couldn't let go of their exes. Now I realize he was talking about himself. I feel sick thinking about all the times I defended him." Last I heard, Dylan moved to another city for a fresh start, Phoenix, according to his brother. He was working at a small marketing firm there, making a fraction of his previous salary, keeping a low profile, supposedly still in therapy. His brother wasn't optimistic about his chances of rebuilding his life. "He's burned too many bridges," he told me during our last conversation. "And honestly, I don't think he's really changed. He still talks about you sometimes, still blames you for everything that happened. He can't accept that his actions have consequences. I hope he's learned to be a better person, but somehow I doubt it. People like him don't change. They just find new victims and new ways to justify their behavior. At least now his future girlfriends will have a fighting chance. Social media makes it easy to research someone's past, and enough people know the truth about Dylan that it'll follow him wherever he goes. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far, if destroying someone's entire life over sabotaged relationships was proportional justice. Then I remember the 3 years of isolation he put me through, the therapy bills from rebuilding my self-esteem, the relationships that could have been meaningful if he hadn't poisoned them from the start. The nights I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me, why everyone kept leaving. Dylan didn't just ruin my dating life, he made me question my own sanity. He convinced me that maybe I really was the problem. Maybe I was unlovable. Maybe there was something fundamentally wrong with me that drove people away. That kind of psychological damage doesn't heal quickly. Even now, years later, I sometimes catch myself wondering if a new partner will believe lies about me, if someone from my past will try to poison my present. So no, I don't feel bad about what I did. Dylan played a stupid game and won a stupid prize. These days, I'm happily married to someone completely different. Someone who's never tried to control my friendships or manipulate my relationships. Someone who builds me up instead of tearing me down. Someone who, when he learned about Dylan's behavior, was horrified that anyone could treat another person that way. My husband and I met through mutual friends who knew the whole story. He'd heard about Dylan's stalking before we ever went on our first date, and his reaction was to ask what he could do to help me feel safe. When Dylan tried his old tricks one last time, showing up at our engagement party uninvited, my husband and his friends quietly escorted him out before I even knew he was there. And Dylan? He's exactly where he deserves to be, alone, with only his own reflection for company. I heard recently that he's tried online dating again, but the photos from his humiliation at that restaurant have become something of a local legend. Women in Phoenix have apparently already started sharing warnings about him in their group chats. Some stories have happy endings, others have exactly the endings they deserve. Dylan got his.